Also developed the Jupiter C rocket that took Explorer 1 up, and also the Saturn rockets that we used for going to the moon. Now, we had one other Mercury astronaut launched here, Gus Grissom, in July of that year, had a very similar flight to Alan Shepard's. So this is the original blockhouse. We're going to go inside. Oh, here's an armadillo over here on the left in the grass. Armadillo having lunch. Those are not native to Florida. They say they probably were originally had armadillos released by a traveling circus, and now we have quite a few in Florida. They're not native to Florida, though. This Redstone rocket that we have out here, this is not a real Redstone. We did have a real one out here, and we had hurricanes 4 years ago, and the one we had out here was damaged, so this is just a mock-up. But that is the launch pad. That's launch pad 5. That's where Alan Shepard launched from. Looked just like that, rocket sitting out there just like that on that day in 1961. We're going inside. Let's go inside. We have an audio, very good audio that you can listen to, and they'll tell you what it was like inside that day. And then before we come back to board, I need everyone to listen a minute. Before we come back to board the bus, if you want to take some photographs, you can do that. We have 10 minutes, so you need to watch your time. And we also have a plaque out front about Alan Shepard, another poster over here on the wall. Take a look at that.
Here's Dr. Warner von Braun, one of the German scientists we got that the Russians met. He died at age 65, rather young up to today's standard. The guy you hear on the video, that's a fuel engineer right here. He'll be looking at that 20.6 windows, 15-inch windows, and make sure the fuel is the right color. From the time they hit the button to start the engine, it took us 20 seconds to build up enough power to start rising. Next time in that 20 minutes, the flames were not the right color, shut it down. We didn't know, we losing rockets sometimes 2 or 3 a day back then.
Welcome to Blockhouse 5. Between 1958 and 1961, the entire world was watching what went on in this room. It's a place that's full of memories for me, even though it's been locked up for more than 30 years. Now, it's been designated by Congress as a National Historic Site. It'll be preserved for future generations to see and to share. But it isn't history for me. It's memories of making history. And every one of us who worked in this little building knew it while we were doing it. What we didn't know was whether or not it would be successful. I was here from the beginning, working as a propulsion engineer, and that goes back to the summer of 1957. That's when the world's first man-made object to reach space, and then to be recovered, was launched right from this site. It was a different world when we gave Alan Shepard his history-making ride to the edge of space in 1961. In the first place, we hadn't a clue what would actually happen to the human body in a weightless environment. We knew Yuri Gagarin went up for the Russians just a month earlier. But the Russians weren't talking, so for us, this was all still theory. And on top of that, rocket science was still just a baby. Test rockets were still exploding with some frequency, so there were no guarantees that something wouldn't go wrong. I was in here with about 100 people that day. Von Braun came down from the Redstone facility for the launch. He was standing behind the firing console, as you can see from the photograph. He's the one wearing the sunglasses. Now, we needed 70 or so technicians just to watch all of these panels, and another 10 people out on the pad to take the Redstone's pulse right up to the minute before launch. Then the guys would scramble into the blockhouse and slam the door. Now, if you look out the window, you can see the launch pad is just 300 feet away. The safe distance for shuttle launches these days is 3 miles, which gives you some idea of how small the Redstone is by comparison. And you wouldn't believe how smoky it was in here. I mean, just about everybody smoked. Nobody thought it was dangerous back then. If you look, you'll see in the console there's these little pull-out ashtrays. I mean, that's how common it was. And we left one of the ashtrays sticking out for you to see. It even has some cigarette butts in it from the 60s. Everything that we were doing was state-of-the-art at the time, but we were really making it up as we went along. It was a whole new technology growing up before our eyes. But by today's standards, everything we did was really primitive. Our gantry was bolted together from an oil drilling rig. And we installed a scale from a commercial truck weighing station under the launch pad because we had to know the weight of the rocket at liftoff. And that room behind us, the readout showed up on that big dial. And if you could look inside all this electronic gear, you'd see thousands of vacuum tubes and fat wires and hand-soldered circuit boards. Within a few years, the space program would push technology so hard that we could miniaturize all the gear in this blockhouse and fit it under the dashboard of a pickup truck. Here in the middle of the room is the launch director's console with Bob Motors. Everybody reported to him at launch time. Bob would run down the list of vital systems: engines, guidance, rescue, medical, weather, communications, and we'd all report in with our go or no go. With Shepard sitting up there in Freedom 7, we were sweating so bad our socks were squishing. It had been tough enough sending up little test modules, but this, I mean, we had a man we all really liked perched on top of a trainload of explosives, and we were going to send him up to a weightless place where his eyes might pop out of his head or his heart might stop. All that plus 1,000 other things we could only guess might go wrong. We were all looking at each other. I mean, who could you get to push the button that might turn Alan Shepard into a Roman candle? Well, it turned out it was Shepard himself. He'd been sitting up there for hours while we checked and rechecked everything, from the launch director's shoe size to the number of peanuts left in the snack box. Maybe he thought that getting vaporized was preferable to waiting anymore. More than likely, it was his unimaginable courage. He pushed all of us into that first shot when he said, "Come on, guys, let's light this candle." By the time we got to the countdown, the tension in this room was so thick you couldn't cut it with a cheese slicer. I mean, every second felt like an hour. And even after that 3, 2, 1 countdown, a lot had to happen in here. Once the fire button was pushed, it took about 5 seconds for the fuel tanks to pressurize. Then the rocket lit up, and we'd have to wait and watch for another 20 seconds while this thing built up enough thrust to lift us off. On top of that, we had this little guy who came down with the other scientists from Redstone. He was standing at the window over there with his hand in the air. His job was to watch the color of the fire shooting out of the rocket. If the color was right, he'd give us a thumbs up that told us it was okay to release the Redstone. Thumbs down, and we'd have to pull the plug. Lucky for us, it was thumbs up. And the rest is history. By the time the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo program were completed, there were over 450,000 of us working on the science and the hardware of our first steps into the universe. These people are the real heroes of the future we're beginning to live today. Though most of us will never know their names. But trust me, not one of us will ever forget the names of some of them. Shepard, Grissom, Glenn, Armstrong, Aldrin. And it all started here, right here where you stand at this very moment. I gotta tell you, it gives me goosebumps.
They're round.
Rotary phones too, cell phones too, blueberries, wherever the hell they go.
Well, that's great. That's so exciting.
Excuse me? Right out here, right over here to my right.
Yeah, I would have loved to.
Right there.
There we go. Now I see. That's amazing.
That's what they did.
Could you imagine they were right here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That would be so cool. Go outside.
Yes.
Go again. What pad is this, Rebecca?
It's pad 5-6.
Excellent.
Smart ass. Look at the fire hose.
Where on top of that?
Oh, look, there's one over here, too.
Yep.
Whose job was it to hang out behind the concrete wall with a fire? Can you imagine if somebody had
What?
What that dude said.
What did he say?
Whose job was it to hang out behind the concrete wall with the fire hose? Probably been more appropriately, what idiot did they get to do it?
Flame trench and a flame deflector that goes inside, so you can see quite a change in that short period of time. They had
Versus the 18
firefighting equipment out here. You can see the stripe concrete abutment. They have firefighting equipment behind there. The gantry would roll on that track, would roll over to the right onto the grass area when they were ready to launch. You can see that in the photo. You can see how that gantry is rolled back. And for an escape system out here, you can see there's a cherry picker out there. So that would have been their how they would have rescued the astronaut if something had happened to the launch vehicle and they had to get the astronaut off. Now, if they launched this rocket, had a problem after it launched from the pad, the red rocket on top, that was an escape system. So that's a solid rocket. It would have fired, would have taken the capsule and the astronaut away to safety. So they never had to use that, but that's what they would have done. This, by the way, up here at pad 6, this is a real mounting ring. That's just a mock-up of one back there, but this is a real mounting ring here at pad 6. And, I was going to tell you about that gantry. In the beginning, you know, there wasn't much of a clean room here. It was open to the elements, and closeout crew would take their sandwiches up there, and they had food up there. But as they went along from one program to the next, they became more strict about the white rooms out here. This structure that you see on the ground, I don't know if he told you back at the blockhouse, this is the original gantry that sat at Complex 26 over where we were at the Air Force Museum. They've taken it apart. They're trying to refurbish it, and hopefully they'll be able to put it back together and put it back up at Complex 26. We have no remaining structures out here from the early days. That is the only one. What would happen when they would deactivate the launch pads, they would demolish those gantries, those service structures, and sell them for scrap metal. So we hope they're able to fix that one. What you see, this between the two rockets here, the reddish structure you see, now that is from Complex 19 where we launched the Gemini astronauts. That is the white room. Before they demolished that gantry out there, they were able to remove the white room and keep it, so we would have it here. The orange colored booster core, those are the booster cores they use for the Delta IV rockets. And the Delta IV Heavy rocket, they strapped 3 of those together, so they're about 52 feet across. It's a huge rocket, and that's what we'll see up by Complex 34. We have a locomotive out here. I think there are 3 of them. Those were used in the Korean War, but they also, when they brought them back over here, they used them in the Titan program. The Titan 3s and 4s were such large rockets. The 2 locomotives would pull the platform from building to building as they assembled the rocket and as they attached the strap-on motors, and then they would take it out to the launch pad. The other 2 are somewhere around here. The wheeled vehicle right there with the one on the side is called a Lark. That was a rescue mission. They used a rescue vehicle they used in the Mercury Gemini program. Had the escape system fired and taken the astronaut away, they either would have landed somewhere in the swampy water out here or out in the ocean. And they had about 4 of those larks positioned around the area. They had a medic on board, a diver on board, about 4 or 5 crew members, and they would have been able to go and rescue the astronauts. That is the rocket you see upright. That is a Thor Able. The Thor missiles were tested out here. The Delta II rockets that they use today were developed from Thor missiles. So we have ibis over there on the left, those birds that you see. All immature ibis, or glossy, all glossy. A couple of white ones in there. Yeah, Kenny and I were just talking about we haven't seen so many, we don't see armadillos too much anymore, so quite a few around today. Over here. Oh yeah, he's a pretty good sized one too, isn't he? He's pretty big. Oh yeah, here's another one over here. Yeah, on the other side of the water. This is a Hound Dog missile that you see just coming up here on the left, and then just past it we have a Minuteman missile. We're getting ready to drive around by the launch pads they used to test the Minutemans. The 1s, 2s, and 3s were tested out here. They had about 92 tests of Minuteman missiles. Remember, all they did here was to test the missiles. They were never kept here for defense purposes, only for testing. Now I want to tell you something about, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Delta II launch pads, but it's one thing I did want to share with you. Delta II rocket has probably the best safety record there is. Very rare to have any accidents. However, in January of 1997, they, oh yeah, where's Armadillo? Oh, there he is, right there on the right. And the other one, yeah, he's over there. Can't hardly see him now. But anyway, January of 1997, they launched Delta II. It only lifted a short distance off the launch pad and it exploded. Now, no one out here was injured, let me say that first, but what they had was an umbrella of fire and debris raining down on the Air Force Station. I'm going to pass around this photo that someone took. So they were down at Cocoa Beach looking back, took a photo of this. We had many cars destroyed. We had blocks of solid fuel falling down to the ground. Many buildings out here were destroyed. They were still using the blockhouse down by Complex 17 A and B. They were building new operations center up in the industrial area, but had not opened it yet. And the people that were working in that blockhouse, toxic gas started seeping in. So luckily, no one hurt. But that was the last time they used that blockhouse for anything. And I just pass that around because sometimes, a lot of times, I have people ask me, why can't we get closer to watch a launch? Well, that lets you know why. You take a look at that and you'll know why. They make these rockets, these shuttles, as safe as they can. By the way, you're going to have some views. Keep looking to your right here. They make them as safe as they can, but there is always a risk of something going wrong and us having an explosion. So we're back on track now. I think they have 80-some launches without an accident since that one happened. But the Delta II is still the safest vehicle out here. Okay, just to tell you real quick, on the Mercury program, those first 2 launches occurring over there at Complex 5-6 on the Redstone rocket, the suborbital flights. After that, they were ready to put man into orbit. In order to do that, they needed a more powerful vehicle, and they began to use the Atlas. So we're going over to Complex 14. We'll see where they launched the next Mercury astronauts. We had seven Mercury astronauts. One did not fly in the program, Deke Slayton. They found out he had a heart murmur, and they would not let him go into space. In the early days, no one had any idea what would happen when they went into space. Some doctors thought that they would die if they went into space, or when they brought them back, their eyeballs would have liquefied, or they would have lost their mind. They had all sorts of ideas that what might happen. So that's why they didn't let Deke Slayton go. He did finally travel into space. He had to wait until 1975, but he was on the Apollo-Soyuz mission, so he did get to go into space. Yeah, when they came out, the Atlas was our first intercontinental ballistic missile, and the first time they brought them down to watch a launch, brought those Mercury astronauts down, it was a launch of an Atlas V. It had about a 50% failure rate at that time, so they had one blew up overhead while they were watching it. Supposedly Alan Shepard said, I hope they get that little problem fixed before we launch. But he wasn't the one that had to climb aboard, it was John Glenn. He's the one that had to climb aboard it the first time. Okay, we're going to see on the left and on the right, you will see two blockhouses. They look like beehives. Complex 31 and 32, those are the Minuteman missile blockhouses. There are, out behind each one, there is a flat surface launch pad and also a missile silo behind each one. The one in the center here, this is the Navajo, for the Navajo launches. This one, you see that black structure on top, they had mirrors and they could reflect down in the blockhouse and see what was going on, but you see none of these have windows. They're different than the blockhouses we saw, no windows on these. This is where the Navajo missiles launched from. We had 10 Navajos that launched. That was a wing missile, a top motor rocket, and they would lift it by gantry. They would place it on top of that structure, and it would launch. And they were delays just about every time they launched, so unfortunately it received a very unflattering nickname. They called it the No-Go Navajo. Let me show you something here. If Kenny, if we can slow down just a minute. I want you to, if you look out over to the left, those light poles that you see, that's one of the silos out there. If you look right in the center, the gray part, that's the silo. 32, 31 is back over to the left. That's where the remains of Challenger are buried, in those two silos. All the parts that they could recover from the spacecraft, they recovered from the ocean or that washed up ashore, they brought here and buried in the two silos. Columbia, they kept those parts. Columbia remains are in the VAB. And they kept those were in boxes there. If any of the engineers want to go back and look at parts and see what happened, how it came, how it was impacted, how it came apart, they can do that. I don't think they quite knew what to do after Challenger accident, or they probably would have kept that for the same reason. Okay, here we have two rockets up here. Pad A is the one on the right, Pad B is the one on the left. Now you can see the blue part, you can see the rocket, and then the white strap-on motors or the solid boosters that you can see on it. This is the oldest operating launch pads that we have out here. They've had over 300 launches. Over 300 launches out here. When they get ready to launch, the service structure will roll back to the left of the rockets. You can see that white column, that's the umbilical tower. But they assemble the rocket in the traditional way here. They assemble it on the launch pad, do all the testing out there like they used to do in the early days. And NASA uses these a lot. They're medium-sized rockets. They use those a lot to send up their unmanned spacecraft like the two Mars rover Spirit and Opportunity launched from here. The Dawn mission, Swift, all sorts of NASA missions going from out here at 17A and B. So, but yeah, you can see those two rockets. We're not quite sure what the launch date is. It'll be sometime next year for those two, but we're not quite sure. Haven't set a date on it yet. Thanks, Kenny. You know, when they first came out here and started launching, there were quite a few families that lived here, more that lived over on the Kennedy side. They let them stay here in the beginning, and when they would get ready to have a launch, they would move them to a motel down in Copa Beach for the launch. But as they began to launch more rockets out here, they finally, the families had to leave for good, could not stay out in this area. But we had quite a few settlements in the area, just east of us here out there on the ocean, about a mile and a half from the ocean. They had a town called Stinkmore. I always wondered how they got that name, Stinkmore. But they did have about a 300 foot long, 300 yard long fishing pier out there, and they had, I think they had a fish processing plant there. So I guess that's where the name came from. Okay, we don't have a lot of traffic out here, but we always have to look and make sure we're okay, Kenny. We don't have any stoplights or anything. So, yeah, we're okay. Well, I know we have someone who came to see the lighthouse, and what we're going to do when we get out, we'll stop in front of it in a minute so you can take some photos from the bus. But the original lighthouse was built in the 1840s. It was located down by the ocean. It was dismantled during the Civil War. They built a new one afterwards, and then in 1892 they began to move it to its present day location. They just refurbished this lighthouse, I think about 2 years, year and a half ago. They stripped it all down and they've repainted. They even redid the copper light room up on top. The original light is not here. It's up at Port Orange at the Lighthouse Museum up there. That's where the original light is. And also you'll see on the left, you'll see coming up Hangar C. Hangar C was the first hangar built out here. They used it for the Vanguard rockets. And when Dr. Von Braun used to come into town to watch launches of his rockets, he had an office in that hangar. So this is Hangar C, just here on the left. And we're going to get up here. Kenny's going to get in front of the lighthouse and stop a minute. The little brick building by the lighthouse, that is original. That was used to store the lamp oil. If you had a chance when you were over in that exhibit hall, you saw the early photographs. There were quite a number of buildings around the area. And they talk about reconstructing those. I don't know what will happen. They always talk about doing that and opening this up for tours, so we'll see what happens. Meantime, we have quite a few people that take this tour just to come out to see the lighthouse. This is the only way anyone can get out to see it. The lighthouse is owned by the Air Force, but just ahead and on the right we have a Coast Guard station.
Excellent.
Got it? Wait a minute. Okay, we do a couple more.
Thank you very much.
Just a few more. Wait a minute. Kenny and I need a passport stamp. You know how people get the lighthouse stamps? We need one to carry around on the bus, don't we, Kenny? Yeah, Kenny was talking about, and it's good that you're out here on a weekend day. We can't stop like this during the week. Okay, I think that's everyone. Okay.
That's pretty cool. That's the electronics.
But it's still an operating lighthouse. And again, the Coast Guard station up here on the right. We have two other launch pads up here. Just past the Coast Guard station, we have Complex 2122. And they first used to they launched about 15 Bull Goose missiles from here, but then they launched the Mace missiles. Now, the building, the structure, you see the exhaust pipes coming out of the back. That's a slant silo. The missile was inside that building and would launch out what they call across the front porch. That's how they would launch the Mace missiles. One of the volunteers at the Air Force Museum, he used to fly F-100s, and after they launched the Mace, they would fly along, come over and fly along behind it. And one day, they neglected to tell them they had about a 3-second delay on launching the Mace. So they flew over, they launched the Mace missile, and went between the two F-100s. And I think they had lots of drinks when they came back that night and had to think about whether they wanted to continue to do that. I think he's still working out there. He tells that story. You know, I mentioned earlier, we do lose all of our history out here. We had two complexes here, 36A and B, and about, I guess maybe a year ago, they took down the two service towers, two very large service towers out here. One of the pads they used a lot for military launches for Department of Defense, but the other one NASA used, they sent Ranger missions up, surveyors. Our first soft landing on the moon, surveyor in 1966, launched from this area. But if you look down the road over here to the right, you can see the blockhouse. All the other blockhouses we see now will be shaped that way, that dome shape with the sloping walls, no windows, only periscopes. But I did read in the paper, there's a group in Florida that's formed a company. They're going to lease 36A and B and hopefully be able to bring commercial companies in here to launch. But NASA used to launch the Atlas Centaurs from there. They would send out satellites or deep space probes. So many historic launches went from that pad. We're going to make a turn up here. We're going down what they call Missile Road, ICBM Road, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. Now, you probably have seen photos of this before, and what it looked like back then, because it doesn't look anything like it now. If you've never seen the photograph, when you go back to the Visitor Center, if you go over to the Launch Control Center, they do have a photo of Missile Road. We had 4 Titan launch pads, 4 Atlas launch pads down this road. And they cut down all the growth when they came in and built the pad so you could look from one all the way down the road to the last one there. Now, of course, everything is overgrown out here, so it doesn't look anything the way it did at that time. We had, by the late 1950s, they probably had about 12,000 people that worked out here, if you can imagine that. Hardly anyone here today. Most of them lived in Merritt Island. There wasn't much to Cocoa Beach at that time, a few homes, maybe one church, one motel, and that was about it. That's about all they had in town. And people to come to work had to drive across the bridge from Merritt Island to Cocoa Beach. It was a wooden bridge, and then they had to drive up a 2-lane road to bring them in here to the Air Force side. So what should have taken about 20 minutes probably took them 2 hours to get to work. There were so many people coming out here. Different companies launching rockets, building rockets. They worked closely together, however. It was before all the bureaucracy came in. If they needed parts, they could go get one from another company. They learned how to build a better rocket. They would have someone go out in the ocean after they, the early days they blew up a lot. So they would go out there and retrieve what they could find in the rocket, bring it back, study it, see what happened, try to correct the problem. They had a lot of fun. I've talked to people that worked out here. They used to take bets on whether or not their rocket would blow up, and then they'd go crawl under a truck and wait and see what would happen. They would have things like they'd launch a rocket and it would turn sideways and head for the next pad, and they'd call it the intra-pad missile. So they had all. We were so used to all our cell phones and computers, didn't have any of that. They had just a board listing what launches would occur that day. So if they wanted to launch, they would just kind of look over at the next launch pad and see if anyone was launching something. If they were not, then they launched their rocket. So it's quite different than it is today. We're going to make a stop out here for a minute. We'll exit the bus and let you take photos, and then we'll take a quick ride around the blockhouse. This is Complex 14. This is where the next 4 Mercury astronauts launched. John Glenn, Scott Carpenter, Wally Schirra, Gordo Cooper. We have a plaque out here for John Glenn since he was the first American to orbit the Earth. This is the astronomical symbol of Mercury. They put the number 7 in the center to represent the Mercury astronauts. We have a time capsule that was buried out there in 1964. It will be opened in 2464 if any of you want to come by and see that when it happens. And that monument is made out of the same stainless steel that was used for the Atlas V rockets. So we'll be out here a few minutes. Watch where you step. Don't step on any fire ant nest. And we're about 4 or 5 hours and have a box lunch. And I think that would be nice.
Yeah, it would be.
Then we can see more around here. Now, what we'll do down here, we'll be able to drive around the blockhouse, and you can look down at the pad. And if you look in your book on page 22, and you can see what it looked like out here, February 20th, 1962, when the Atlas rocket launched, carrying John Glenn into space, first American to orbit the Earth, aboard Friendship 7. And they've demolished all of the structure out here that was out at the pad. This is a blockhouse. This is one of the few blockhouses still in use. The Air Force remodeled inside. They do use this as a conference center. Okay, the vulture doesn't want to move. He has lunch in the center of the room. I don't know what he had there. If you look over here, on the right of the bus, you can see the parking spaces. Unfortunately, someone stole John Glenn's name. Scott Carpenter, Wally Schirra, Gordo Cooper, they were the 4 Mercury astronauts that launched out here. And someone stole John Glenn's name. And what they would do with the Atlas rocket, looking out in front of us, at the right-hand side, you can see the ramp going up. So they would take the rocket around, it would go up that ramp, take it out to the end of this structure. The service tower, the gantry, sat right at the left end. When they got ready to launch, it would roll back. The umbilical tower was on the opposite side. The ocean is just past those bushes out there. We're right at the ocean. This blockhouse, 10 to 15 feet thick in places, 2 layers of concrete, sand floating or in the center of the tube. Periscopes you can see up on top. That's how they would look out at the pad to see what was going on. And I don't think I was out here with Kenny. I was out here with someone one day. We tried to get the Air Force to let us go inside. They weren't too receptive to that idea. Was it you? Yeah, we were out here and they didn't let us go in. I did go in there once. We had an open house out here where the employees could come out. They have some wonderful photographs inside. I think it would be nice if they let us go in and see what it was like. That's what makes it hard to maintain the facilities out here. They only open it for us to bring a tour over once or twice a day. Even if they were able or had the monies some way to, renovate facilities, it would be hard to bring the money in to maintain them because you can't bring it something that's open every day that you can bring people in to see it. So, the Mercury program. All through the Mercury program, Soviet Union was ahead of us. They put the first man in space in April of 1961, launched Yuri Gagarin. They put first woman in space, first cruise of 2, first to orbit the Earth. But for the United States, they proved that they could put man in space, bring him back safely, and that he could function in space. So building on all of that technology, they were working their way toward going to the moon. They began to plan for the next program for Gemini. We're going to go up and we can't drive down around Gemini blockhouse. That road is in very bad condition. They tried to take a bus down there, it got stuck. But we're going to stop right out front. They have a scoreboard showing all of the astronauts that launched from out at Complex 19. But you can see all of these blockhouses look the same all the way up. When we get out to Complex 34, that is the largest of any of the blockhouses, and that is the only launch pad out here on the Cape side that was built for peaceful exploration of space. All the other launch pads, 14-5, they were originally used to test missiles. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the tall white structure that you see that sits over at Complex 37. And we have that Delta IV Heavy rocket sitting out on that pad, and I'm going to tell you more about that. We're going to get a nice view of that. The one that's launching maybe sometime in December, but that will be carrying a classified satellite for National Reconnaissance Office when it goes up. But anyway, if you look on page 23, you can see out here at Complex 19, this was a launch of a Titan II rocket. That's what they used for the Gemini capsule. And we now had 2 astronauts in a capsule, 2 in a capsule. This is a list of all the astronauts that launched out here. We had 10 man launches in 1965, 1966. Remember, after Gemini 3, after that launch, that's when they moved mission control to Houston, Texas. You can see over there Gemini 8, Mr. Neil Armstrong, who became Imagine, 2 together doing that for 2 weeks, but that's what they did. Wally Schirra, he is the only Mercury astronaut that flew in the Gemini program and flew in the Apollo program. Gus Grissom was in both of those programs, but of course he lost his life in the Apollo 1 fire, so he never did fly on a mission. But he also is in all 3 programs. We learned with the Gemini program, we learned how to do spacewalks and how to do rendezvous docking, all the things we would need, and the long duration, all the things we would need for going to the moon. Now, if you look down there, you can see that blockhouse to the right of it, what's left of that structure, most of it demolished many years ago. And also on in that photograph on page 24, this time-lapse photo, but you can see at the very top of that gantry, that erector gantry, is that White House that they have back at the museum that they were able to salvage before they demolished everything out there. Okay, they started testing Saturn rockets in the 1960-61 period. The Saturn 1s and then the Saturn 1Bs before we went to the Saturn 5 rocket. So NASA built this complex out here, well, they actually had 2, 37 where you see the Delta IV rocket and 34 where we're headed. Both of those were used by NASA for the Apollo program. But we're going out here to Complex 34, and this is where we had the Apollo 1 fire. January 27th in 1967, we had the three astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee. They were out here. They were doing on-pad testing, no fuel in the rocket, just doing testing. They were in the capsule. They had electrical arcing that caused a flash fire. There was it was an oxygen environment. There were a lot of flammable material inside. So they had a fire. All three of them were killed in less than 17 seconds. So they could not get the hatch open. That devastated the NASA community. They had expected eventually to lose an astronaut when they went into space. They did not expect it to happen on the ground. So they grounded the program. They made over 3,000 changes. They came back with a safer vehicle. And then in October of 1968, out here we launched Apollo 7. So we're going to go out and see this pad. Now this blockhouse, the largest one, the walls are 35 to 40 feet thick in places. There is a steel coil underneath that blockhouse, that firing room, to absorb the shock, the blast of the launch. 3 feet thick doors, blast doors, motorized doors. They did have a way out in case they could not get the doors open. There are several tunnels coming out, and you can look over here. They don't let us go inside any longer. It's been quite a few years before they let anyone, they'll let anyone go inside. Not quite sure why. Because it probably has to do with maintaining the facility, such as air conditioning, that type of thing. Tunnels coming out. This little structure you see here on the right, that would be one of the exits from the tunnel. They had to use it. We have a photo on page 25, and you can see what it looked like out here at that time, and see Saturn rocket sitting out there on the pedestal. And if you look in this photo, if you look on the left-hand side of the page, you can see the service tower. And by the way, when we exit the bus, I have two photos that are better than the ones that are in the book that you can take a look at and see what it looked like out here. There are rails. We still have tracks here that you can see. This is how that service tower would slide back. It would be brought all the way back over here to the right to be parked when it was time to launch. We still use cable trays. They tell you why we use the cable trays. They tell everyone that. We did not have the technology to locate the blockhouse or the firing room. That's what it is a firing room. A safe distance from the pad. It had to be close because they had to run cables from the blockhouse out here to the rocket. So we still have what's left of our cable trench over here that you see on these walls that you see. The cables would run underneath the pad area. We have rooms underneath. Off to the left, what you see are two blast deflectors. They weigh 99 tons each. They're angled a little differently, and they only used one of these. And they would roll it on, pull it on the track, so it would go underneath the pedestal, and it would deflect the flames to the right, to the left. There's a refractory or heat-resistant brick there underneath that pedestal. The rocket sat up on top. So we have a kiosk here that you can take a look at. It has different photographs about construction of this pad area, what it looked like out here. We're going to be out here for about 10 minutes, and I need everyone, this is very important, we need to stay on the concrete. Do not visit the wildlife. This is a good place for rattlesnakes. Do not go underneath that blast deflector. We have rattlesnakes. And occasionally we have alligators around, so that's why we want you to stay on the concrete. We'll be all right if we stay on the concrete.
can always cut the audio out.
I actually wasn't even worried about that.
This is where Gus and his buddies died.
Yeah. I want to go see the pad. I didn't want to walk over here too
Okay,
much.
all right.
I just wanted you to get a picture of them.
Yep.
Get a picture or just a video?
Just video.
Yeah, what is that? It's just tarred over, right?
I don't know. Could be.
There's like bricks or something underneath.
Yeah.
They have like their name.
Yeah.
Redstone. That's amazing.
How sophisticated that is. We were watching on TV back then. Yeah. Right?
The Saturn 1B rocket on its side, that's what Apollo 7 used. Only went into Earth orbit to test the components for landing on the moon. So after this launch, all the facilities were ready over at Kennedy Space Center. They moved all manned launches over to the Kennedy side. We began to launch the Saturn V rockets that took me into the moon. Yeah, y'all can, if you want to pass the photos around, if they'll got a chance to look at those. So last manned launch here at Kennedy, here at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, October 1968. Now, by the time they get over to the Kennedy side, they've developed the technology. They don't have to have a blockhouse sitting right out here by the rocket. Wouldn't have worked with a Saturn V rocket. Wouldn't have worked at all. By then, they were able to put the launch, the firing room, the launch control center. That's what the blockhouse is. They were able to put it about 3.5 miles away from the launch pad. So, and we're were going to go up there and drive around Pad 8. Had that accident that occurred with Apollo 1, had that occurred on a flight that had been launched, they may have never known what caused the problem. We may have never gone to the moon, after that. I heard someone mentioning that was Apollo 1. There was no Apollo 2 or 3. I don't know how they could come up with these numbers. There was no 2 or 3. 4, 5, and 6 were all test flights. 7 from here. We go over to the Kennedy side. Apollo 8 is launched in December of 1968. I remember that well. First time we orbited the moon, and everyone on Earth held their breath, not certain if it would reappear from the backside of the moon. A lot of fear it would go skipping on into outer space. So that Christmas Eve reading they did from space. Apollo 9 was only, it was Saturn V rocket, but only went, they sent it up into Earth orbit just again testing parts, and then Apollo 10 went to the moon. That was the dress rehearsal. 11 through 17 all were to be moon landings. Apollo 13, how many saw the movie? That was a good movie. Apollo 13 had the emergency. They had a ruptured oxygen tank, and they had to make that return to Earth, so they only went around the moon once, came back. So we had a total of 6 missions, landed 2 men each on the moon. So we've had a total of 12 men have walked on the moon from 1969 through December of 1972. Now let me tell you a little bit about this Delta 4 rockets, because we're going up the beach road now. We're going to head out to Saturn V. We'll go up around the shuttle pads. But the Delta 4 rockets, they have 5 configurations of those rockets. The one we're looking at, that is 3 of those booster cores. Remember the booster cores we saw back at the Rocket Garden? It's 3 of those strapped together. This will only be the 3rd launch of a Delta IV Heavy when it goes up. Maybe in December, we're not quite sure. The other 4 configurations, they would use just one common booster core, and then they would put a different number of strap-on motors. So there will be an opening. I'll try to let you know when it's coming up, that you can look straight through back at the rockets if you want to get your cameras ready. It's a good view back at the rocket. We came over here one day, we're talking about how they assembled the Delta II on the launch pad the traditional way. Well, they're different with the Delta rockets. There is a processing facility just by the pad, and these rockets are assembled horizontally, and they have 3 bays. They could assemble 3 of these large Delta IVs at one time. I think it's coming right up here, isn't it, Kenny? The opening, so they can look back right here. Is it here? Here we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, there's that was the best view, but you can see up here too. There's openings. You'll be able to see up here. Anyway, that building is a horizontal integration facility. It's called the HIF, and it's that white building you see over here on the right. And when they assemble the rocket, then what they have to do, they roll it over, and it takes, it extends beyond this road. It really takes a huge area going up. It takes about 30 minutes to roll it from the building to that launch pad, and it takes about 20 minutes to lift it up and put it on top of the pad itself. Now, when they get ready to launch, that white structure, the service tower, rolls back, and we have just the rocket sitting out there by that, the gray part that you see by the lightning tower, that's the umbilical tower. You can see that original blockhouse. This is, President Kennedy made 3 visits here. The last one was to that blockhouse. That was 6 days before his assassination. He came out here to talk about progress on the Apollo program. That's a loud rocket. They wouldn't let us anywhere close to that when they were launching it. But I want to tell you about that facility. We went inside one time, and they have a certificate hanging on the wall. They won an award. They have the levelest concrete floor in the world. They have an engineering award up there. They also have a photograph up there. When they had the building completed, they did not have the power on yet, so they were working on that. They took off the top of the cable tray. It was dark inside, and someone was standing there, and he said, you know, this doesn't feel like cable. So he got back out, and they took lights and showed them down there, and it was like a 10-foot alligator in the cable tray that had gotten inside, and they had covered it up. So they have a photograph of the 10-foot alligator being carried away. That's on the wall by the award. All right, let me tell you about over here on the left. These two tall buildings that you see, there was a third one in front of these two. That one has already been demolished about, I guess, a year ago. These were the three. This was called the ITL facility, Integrate, Transfer, and Launch. So they would they would start with the locomotives, would pull the platform in the first building, they would assemble the rocket. The locomotives would pull it to the second building. That's where they would add the strap-on motors or the boosters. And then the locomotive would pull it out to the pad. That was for the Titan 3s. And when they started the Titan 4s, they built that third building out there. Now, they probably will demolish these two buildings also. No one's using them. Probably are full of asbestos. They were built in the 60s, so probably take those down. The Titan rockets launched from both 40 and 41. 41, the last one down, which is now the Atlas V pad, they built that probably in about, I think 2000 is when they built that. We had the gantry that sat out here at Complex 40, that was taken down a few months ago. And that was the largest movable structure in the world. It's about 35 stories tall. But again, SpaceX is coming in. They've developed a Falcon rocket. You know, rockets, it's easier to build your own structure for your particular rocket. They're all assembled a different way. That's why they have different facilities now. Spacecraft, those probes that were sent into space. The Vikings to Mars launched out here. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Some of you may recall the Voyager missions. Voyager, they were launched from Complex 41. Right down here. Yeah, Kenny was telling me they launched weather rockets down there. In addition to all of those 3,200 launches that we've had here, we've also had about 4,600 weather rockets that have gone up. So. But anyway, the Voyager, you can go online and read about it. They were launched, there were two of them launched in 1977. They were only to last for 5 years. They were to visit the outer planets. They are still going strong. They are still receiving communications from them. Not as many as we did at the beginning, and eventually they will lose contact. It will leave our system and go who knows where. But if you remember, they each carry a recording, and they called it the Golden Records. And it's all set up with a stylus ready to play should anyone find it. It has greetings from Earth in about 200 different languages. They have music from different cultures. And they have a drawing of the planets and showing where we are located in the solar system, where Earth is. So should someone find that one day, we've told them who we are and where we live, but still going strong, how to find us. But yeah, all of that happened from out here. The two Voyagers were launched from here. 41 Viking also launched from here. A lot of the ones that went from 40 and 41 were military satellites. We are now crossing from the Cape side. We're getting ready to cross into the Kennedy side. We will have the beach house coming up on the right. So you we'll point that out to you. If those of you that don't remember, Apollo astronauts used to use this beach house a lot. There was a settlement up here, a little town called DeSoto Beach, and this is the only facility that they kept from DeSoto Beach. This house coming up just here on the right. So they use that. The astronauts can go there before missions. It's a place they can go and relax. They can take their families out there. They still use that. Shuttle astronauts still use it, but it's the Apollo days that probably, if the walls could talk out there, I think there were a lot of parties that went on there.
Is that where they found Jeannie?
I'm sorry?
Is that where they found Jeannie?
Yeah, Jeannie. Yeah, that's probably where they took her. I think the bus was. I think the house was built after Jeannie, after the Mercury. Yeah, I think that was probably 62, 63 for that house. Yeah, maybe a little bit later than that. This is 41. The Atlas rockets launched from here. Lockheed Martin builds these rockets. We had a launch here in January 2006. We had New Horizons. Some of you may recall reading about that. Fastest spacecraft ever. It's on its way to do a flyby of Pluto. Pluto is so far away, it will take 9 years to make that journey. So not quite 3 years into the journey, but that's where it launched from here. The launch pad is in the center of these lightning towers. For the Atlas V rocket, they assemble the rocket in that building. And this is what they call a clean pad. They only roll that rocket out 24 hours prior to launch, so they do no processing on that launch pad. Now we got a beautiful beach over here on the right. 43 miles of pristine beach. No one is allowed to go out here but the sea turtles. We have one of the largest nesting areas on the east coast, all of Brevard County beaches. Okay, up ahead we have pad 39A, and behind it, north of it, is 39B. So again, these were originally built and used to launch Saturn V rockets that took man to the moon. When we were launching the Saturn rockets, we only had the concrete hard stand out here. All of that steel structure that you see, that was built for launching shuttles. And there's a good photo in the middle of page 6, 5, and 6, and you can see what it was like. They would bring the umbilical tower, would come out with the Saturn V rocket on that platform, and they also would bring the mobile service tower out on the platform. There are rooms underneath the concrete hard stand. That's how they do all the connections, make all the connections to come up for communications, for computers. That's how they do. But you can see, one thing I like to point out, people always ask me, does everything burn up out here? And you can see it's fine. When the shuttle launches, now Saturn V was much more powerful than the shuttle, and all of you that saw the shuttle know how powerful that was. The shuttle will clear that tower in about 5 or 6 seconds. And once it clears the tower, it's traveling almost 100 miles per hour. We're going around A. We're going to turn just here and go around A.
Are we going to stop though?
No, we can't stop. Security will not allow us to stop. We are. We're going to slow down. We cannot stop. Security will not allow us to stop. Okay, Saturn V rocket took twice as long to clear the tower. It was all liquid fuel, was slow moving. This is liquid fuel and solid fuel for the shuttle. But this is where all of the lunar missions, Apollo 8 launched from here. All of the lunar missions except for Apollo 10, it went from over at Pad B. Did you have a question? Yeah, Friday launch of Endeavour went right from here at Pad A. This is exactly where the shuttle launch occurred Friday night. All of our shuttle launches for the last 2 years have gone from this pad. It will be used for all remaining launches. We'll go out here. But you can see it looks fine. They let the photographers, NASA brings them out the night before. They'll set up cameras outside the fence, and then they come back after launch and get their cameras. NASA has cameras set inside. There's a gator over there. NASA had cameras. They have them set inside the fence area and up on the shuttle, on the structure itself. But again, all of that concrete hard stand, all of that was built in the 60s for the Apollo moon program. Still here, still being used. We have a liquid hydrogen tank. You can see here on the right. Off to the other side of the pad, we have liquid oxygen. And when they bring the shuttle out, the external tank is empty, and they will fill it day of launch, and they fill it with those two propellants. So you can see the platform sitting there on top of the pedestal. So they, in the VAB, they stack the shuttle on that platform. They bring that out here, and it also launches from that platform. And when we have ignition, flame is deflected through openings in the platform, goes down into that 42-foot deep flame trench, going out to the right, past the water tower out that way. You can see all the cameras stand set up out here. If you look about halfway down from the lightning mast, you can see that little small white box. That is the white room that swings up to the hatch of the orbiter. It's how the astronauts board, where the closeout crew is. There's a gator on the bank right across the water. Gator laying on the grass up on the bank.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Kenny's going to stop a minute real quick so we can do photos before security yells at us. You can see when they bring the shuttle out, they have to go up an incline. The crawler has a self-leveling system, and it keeps that platform in the shuttle vertical as they go up that incline, and then they place that platform on the pedestal. We have an escape system. You can see it now. If you look to the left of that structure, there are 7 slide wires running down to the ground. There's a steel basket atop each one, holds 3 people. So in an emergency, they would climb in a basket. They would take about a 30-second ride down to the ground. We have nets on the ground, and there's a bunker located next to the net. For the Apollo astronauts, they had, if they were on a lower level, they also on a higher level, they had some kind of slide wire. Lower down, they had to go down onto the concrete hard stand. They jumped in a tunnel, and they slid down to what is called the rubber room, and the room was lined with rubber. They would slide down into that room, and then they would go in another room. They had chairs. They could sit down, strap in case there had been an explosion of the Saturn V rocket. And they also had food and water in there to last for a few days until they could be dug out. Same thing, the bunker by the net, same thing for the shuttle astronauts. There's a room in there stocked with supplies. This is the original crawlerway. To my knowledge, they've never had to do any repairs to it. It is 7.5 feet deep, 3 separate layers of fill. They put asphalt sealer on top of that, and then they use river rock. River rock acts as a ball bearing, and when they're moving out to the launch pad. This crawlerway is the size of an 8-lane freeway. That's how wide it is, and it's a 1-lane road. It's not a 2-lane road. When if you look down, you can kind of see how wide it is if you look back that way. The crawler straddles that grassy median, so the crawler and the platform are taking up the entire crawlerway. Now we have a crawler coming up here on the right, one of 2 that we have, and will turn 44 years old in January. Between the two of them, they have moved all of the Saturn rockets and 124 shuttles. That's how many shuttle launches we've had, 124. You can see a driver cab on the corner. Diagonally across, we have a second cab. Top of that is the size of a baseball infield. We have diesel engines, generators, electric motors, and it gets 42 feet to the gallon. That is not miles, that is feet. 42 feet to the gallon. 0.8 of a mile is how fast it moves. They won't go over that. They begin to get vibration if they do. But it was built by Marion Power and Shovel Company out of Marion, Ohio. You know, they've since gone out of business, but that's who built it. It was assembled here on the crawlerway. So, not quite sure. They were talking about using the same two crawlers and may build a new one for the new program. We don't know that yet.
The new program will launch from 39 here?
Yes, those drawings I have on 27 and 28. The first one is the crew vehicle Ares 1. It will launch from 39B, and then the heavy lift vehicle Ares 5 will go from pad A that we just left. So they're going to have to redo both launch pads and get them ready. That's why when we transition from one program to another, there's going to be about that 4 to 5 year gap to get everything ready. But they will be doing some unmanned testing. It's just for the manned launches. It'll be about 4 to 5 years after shuttles retire. This is the VAB built, completed in 1966. It is 525 feet tall, 52 stories tall, built for the Saturn V rocket, 36 stories tall. When it was completed in 1966, it was the largest building in the world in terms of volume, and it's said to be the fourth largest now. I think it's dropped down to fourth largest now in terms of volume. Number one is the Boeing plant in Washington State. That's number one. Just to the left of it, the low building with the black shutters, that is Launch Control Center. And we have 4 firing rooms. They would use one for launching. That's where the launch team will be. Always 3 days prior to launch. That's when they come out. Clock starts 3 days prior. If you look over here on your left, flagpole by the banks of the water, blue box just to the right of it, just beside it. That's the countdown clock that you see on TV. That is original from the Apollo Moon program. Press site, about 700 to 900 reporters were out here Friday night. Always have that many coming out here to report on launch. No one's here at work because they still have a launch hangover. No. Most of the people here work Monday through Friday. So we have very few people that work out here on the weekends. Most of them Monday through Friday, and most of them day shift. The VAB, you can see just the two on the east side that we just passed. Those are the 2 high bays that we use for the shuttle, but all 4 used for Saturn rockets. That flag, by the way, is almost 21 stories tall. And those stripes are wide enough this bus could drive down one of the stripes. Stripes are as wide as the lane on the roadway, the highway. And the stars are 6 feet from point to point. The background, the blue background, which doesn't look blue from this angle with the stars, that's the size of a basketball court. So it's deceiving, does not appear to be that large. So up through 1978, they let people go inside. Yeah, up through 1978, they let people go inside with the Saturn rockets. They were liquid fueled at the pad. We had no fuel inside. Now we do with the shuttle, and so it's restricted access. Can't go inside the building. We did build some new facilities for the shuttle program here on the right. These are orbiter processing facilities, OPFs, When Endeavour comes back on the 29th, they'll take it here into Bay 2. Atlantis is over in Bay 1. And then we have Discovery out here in Bay 3. Now Discovery will be going up. Another crawler over there too, by the way. Discovery will be going up in February. We had a big alligator out here earlier. I don't know if he'll still be here. It's getting a little cool. He may have left, but you never know. We'll check. He was right up here on the grass. Oh, he's here. He's here. I don't know if that's a manatee out there or what. But when they land, the scheduled landings, they always try to bring them back here within 4 to 6 hours. They'll be towing it down this road we see here on our left. Put the nose wheel on that blue line, tow it right over to processing facility. We will only go to California if we have bad weather, and we cannot extend the mission. And the first thing they're going to try to do is extend the mission a day or two, come and land here. But if not, we have to go to California, and then we have to bring it back on top of 747. It's very time-consuming, very expensive. Okay, well, we're headed over to the Saturn V Center, and this is where the tour ends. You want to make certain that you have all of your personal belongings with you when you exit the bus. When you get ready to leave, you come outside. All the buses will be running to take you back to the Visitor Center. And inside, when you first go in, they do a recreation of the Apollo 8 launch, and the other theater talks about the Apollo 11 moon landing. Of course, the star of the building is the rocket. Rocket's inside the building, taking up almost the entire length of the building, so you can walk underneath that rocket. For that launch Friday night, this is where NASA brings their invited guests. This is called the Banana Creek viewing site. NASA will have former astronauts here. They'll have diplomats, people that work with space agencies in other countries. That's who comes out here to watch a launch. You can see we have some leftover ones sitting over there on the bleachers. The vultures sitting over there. I didn't say that. But you can see what a great view they have. They're only about 3.5 miles away. Look out across the water. You can see the 2 launch pads, A on the right, B on the left. Black vultures. Yes, they love it here. We get as many as 200 will come out here. And they're funny to watch because every now and then they get mad at someone, they chase them off. But they like when it rains, they like to come there and take fresh baths and just talk about their day and what they had for lunch and that kind of thing. All right, what you want to do is, how many of you have been here already? Do any of you want to go to International Space Station Center? Okay, the last bus down here, very last bus down, will send you around